Welcome to another episode of MoloMolo Tech Talk. I'm Dr. PK and this is Anele. It's a Friday afternoon. Wow, come on, man. Really exciting to be here. Anele, how are we doing?
Doing good. Always doing good on a Friday. How are you, Dr. PK?
Good. I mean, we're
Uh-huh.
having, a Friday midday slash episode today, which is great. Hopefully we'll be, tackling a few things. But I'm well. It's a Friday. I'm just a bit tired. The day's not even over yet. Usually we have tech talk and the day's over.
Yeah.
Now we are discussing and I'm still gonna get back into work, but no, all good. All good. And you?
It's awesome. No, I'm good. Same. Happy that it's Friday. And I'm also really excited about what we're going to talk about today. So, yeah.
All right. So now let's get into it. So today's topic is really resonating around kind of a very interesting but very important topic, which is the ability to analyze things as systems, the ability to understand the impact of systems in our lives. There is a very interesting study that was done, which is titled, and I'll show it up on the screen. It is definitely something that is quite interesting because I think we will definitely have a bit of a discussion around it. So the interesting thing about this study, and there you go on the screen, it talks about the effects of simulation based science instruction on fifth grade students using systems thinking and problem solving perceptions. Now it may seem like a mouthful, but essentially it's trying to understand what are the effects of using simulation for fifth graders using a concept called systems thinking. Very interesting study. I do think that it's something that I want to first ask you, Anele, what your view or your understanding of systems thinking. What would you say?
Sure. So, my view or my understanding of systems thinking is having a bigger picture to a complex problem, right? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, take youth unemployment in South Africa. The solution, if you had to look at one solution, is that everybody needs a job, right? But if you want to tackle a complex problem like youth unemployment or unemployment in general, you'd want to look at all the aspects at a social level, at an economic level, and at an education level to see how all of these factors can come together and how they can play a role in the ecosystem so that we can solve one complex problem. Because to solve a complex problem takes a number of solutions.
Yep.
And I think systems thinking then opens up those opportunities. What partners can we bring on board? And what loopholes are there? So it's basically a system of connections and feedback loops into how we can solve a problem and how we can look at it in the bigger picture. Ultimately, I think when it comes to systems thinking, it's either we are already aware of it or we're not aware of it, or we're already doing it, but we're not aware of it.
Wow. Nice one. Man, I have nothing to add because that is spot on. Definitely. System thinking is, I would sum it up in a way that it's just being aware of what you naturally tend to do when you are faced with a complex decision. That is what how I will summarize it. Of course, some are more aware than others, but fundamentally, the human brain is needs to stop and analyze, especially when the outcome is of consequence, right? The outcome is of consequence. Usually the human brain tends to kind of stop and think about, wait a minute, I've been burnt before. Let's do something else. No, definitely. And so, but what would you say? I mean, of course, I think where you've answered the second question of why systems thinking is so important. But why do you think, even though we understand it, even though it's a science that is well studied. Why do you think is it so difficult to apply and get results through systems thinking?
Sure. I don't know. I think again, if we go back to the study with the simulation and the diagram with the fifth graders, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's traditionally we always want to we want to solve a problem, looking at one solution. Okay, for example, unemployment or climate change. For example, we know that we need to make sure that the ozone layer is but I think what's important about systems thinking is that it gives you a more interactive and a more engaging idea around how you can solve the problem, right? So it gives you a much bigger
Mm-hmm.
picture. I think what could be complicated with systems thinking is that it is oversimplified in terms of how it approaches problem solving, because it doesn't always give us the anticipated problems that could occur when we are solving the problem. So it's very engaging with the simulation, for example, very engaging. It gives a lot of confidence because we're able to solve a problem used in real time, right? Using all the
Mm-hmm.
different factors. But what's missing is then the oversimplification of the solution, right? Without
Mm-hmm.
seeing some of the challenges along the way.
Yeah, no, you're right. And of course, but that's in a way, I would say that is the beauty of systems thinking in that it can be scaled down to accommodate without losing its purpose a fifth grader as much as it can be scaled up and be made completely complex or fully encompassing the complexity of a situation for a head of state. I think for me, one of the reasons I would think what systems thinking is, and you alluded to it, is so difficult to see results is because there's one factor that we forget when it comes to systems. The and there's a concept called emergent behavior, and I think you've highlighted to it, right? It's the unintended consequence, the unintended, unplanned, unforeseen result of an action or inaction. And that usually is separate in time and space, right? So i.e. potentially something that you didn't do or did, you only see the result of it in a couple of weeks time or a couple of months time, things like health. Health is a very complex system that has emergent behavior,
Yeah,
which
agreed.
are separate in time and space, right? Some things that I do or don't do now, I will only really see the result of it in 20 or 30 years' time, which is scary. But that's the truth.
Um,
So I
yeah.
definitely do think about that. But for me, I guess I go back to Africa's got such complex problems, and you would think that time would have spent to really study out systems thinking such that these problems can be moved forward. But yet it doesn't seem the case. Maybe for me at least, I don't get a sense that systems thinking, or at least a flavor of it, is really talked about a lot in technical conferences or financial conferences, because I would think that that is one good way of trying to solve problems, no?
Yeah, I think like what I mentioned earlier, some of us are perhaps aware of it and some of us are already doing it, but we're not aware of it. For
Mm-hmm.
example, you mentioned something about health and crisis. During COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic, I think I can look at that as an example of a systems thinking approach, even though it was at a crisis level. And I do think to answer you, I think for me where systems thinking gets complicated is there's one big complex problem, and if we're bringing in different players to create different solutions, I think perhaps we do meet certain solutions along the way to solve the bigger problem. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we've got a lot of complex problems in our own continents, but we have offshoots where we are solving them in pockets, and I don't know if that in a way is one of the good things that can come up about systems thinking, as
Mhm.
opposed to waiting to come up with all the solutions so we can solve the problem all at once. It's solving it along the way, so it's bringing along this player so that if we say youth unemployment is because the education system, for example, doesn't create a good enough pathway for young people to get into the workspace. So maybe this part of the problem will be solved with these particular partners and players, but then we need to bring in these other particular players as well. So I think we have been doing it to a certain extent, but because we don't know what to call it, we are not empowered by the fact that we actually can be empowered by systems thinking
Mhm.
if we know what to call it, and we can see how it can help us solve for more problems, because that's how we can bring more partners on board, and that's how we can see the problem clearly and start to clearly see all the different compartments of it that can be solved through working with different partners and different approaches as well. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I have a slightly different view in a sense that, yes, I think people are maybe less aware and maybe are coming up with different solutions. I think that there is just a lack of coordination. That's what I think. I think I think the data is there. In South Africa we have Stats SA. In Germany we have a different agency. But in first world countries, all these agencies talk to each other in terms of data. In African countries or underdeveloped countries, these companies have produced reports for the sake of audits or for the sake of a mandate, but that data is not really transformed into an actionable event for another agency that can take that into context. So I
Mm,
think what ends up happening is you end up having, like you said, these localized solutions along the way, which are only solving symptoms and not fundamentally finding a proper solution for the root cause.
spot on.
Um, and I think it's just a lack of coordination. When I look at this, and that's why I'm saying system thinking is so amazing, because you can break down its concept into really simple things that a fifth grader can understand. And one of the things is it doesn't work if there's no cooperation, right? The kids, if they don't cooperate to better understand the system, and you push here and and you change it here, and the feedback that they give each other, the comment that they make
Mm,
about the system is part of the solution, right? The
true.
It's not your own view of the system, it is the collective view and the collective understanding that gets transferred to your own mental understanding, individual, but it comes from collective.
True.
And 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 all of a sudden you start realizing, if we are not able to really talk and transfer data, and there's a sense of, no, this is my department and that's your department, and but yet you hand a report or whatever, you will never really get to really see the full picture. You'll never really get to see really what is really the problem. Why are people leaving the company? Really,
Yeah.
is it really the competitor? Really? you know
Mm,
so so I do think there is, and that's the challenge for me in systems thinking. It's the human factor of collaborating, listening before speaking,
mm,
leaving your ego at the door. Just because you've done it 20 years ago and it was successful doesn't mean it's the same thing that's needed right now. um so yeah, man, it's that's what I'm saying. This conversation is so deep, and I like it because it goes from the small kids, and it's showing that there are key attributes to making systems thinking work,
mm.
that whether you're 5 years old or 6 years old, or whether you're 70 years old and you're head of a state, those principles don't change.
Yeah.
So, but I guess the next question I have is, what are some advantages that systems thinking would have in education that could potentially remove some limitations that we currently see?
Sure. I guess, well, just going back to the article, looking at the simulation model, I think systems thinking can make education more engaging and definitely more empowering and and build more confidence because
Mm-hmm.
you see the problem solving in real time. So I think even in education, when you have an experiment where the kids are working through a simulation as opposed to looking at a diagram, which is more flat and more, I guess, abstract.
Mm-hmm.
Systems thinking does allow the learner to see the bigger picture, to connect the dots, to collaborate, and to actually see in real time what the problem solving would look like. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what that would look like in the African context because I do think when it comes to simulations, it does take a lot of time, a lot of engagement, and a few resources to a certain extent um,
Mm.
to get educators to get pupils to start thinking that way. It's a lot of time invested
Mm.
into systems thinking because it's a lot of critical thinking as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an incredible concept. Yeah,
No, I hear you. I think I was also thinking about that is that, simulation requires resources, right? It's you can't simulate on a with chalk. I mean, you can. And I think that's what you probably alluded to, is the time that it takes maybe to prepare a lesson,
yeah. And
to
sorry, can I just
allow.
add? Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, Dr.
tell
PK,
me.
can I just add that especially in the African context,
Mm-hmm.
simulation would really work because in most cases pupils are living within the problems that they have to solve. And I think
Mm.
it will give them a lot of confidence to solve the problems around their own communities as well. So sorry, I just had to cut in there. And
No, no, no.
yeah.
I think that's basically true, right? Because especially when you pick a problem that is relevant, essentially, right? A relevant problem that, I mean, essentially, you're trying to find a way to link everyday simulation or everyday, real time, events to a concept that you're trying to teach someone, right? The kids. And in a way, the simulation is like a story, right? So you're trying to tell stories in order for you to teach a concept. And people learn better in stories because stories interconnect people, interconnect behavior. It has a very clear beginning, has somewhat vague end, and you have to make sense of it, and you can interpret it in one way or the other way. And it requires critical thinking. And I do think it boils down to preparation. I think it boils down to level of effort. Because in general, actual fact, the African culture is a storytelling culture, right? It's just that, educators are pressed for time.
Mhm.
they're, they're like, no, man, I don't know. You have 50, 60 kids in the class and you
To
have so
mark
many,
papers.
you have to mark papers. You have so many things to go through in 45 minutes, 1 hour telling stories, and then we love telling stories. That's another thing, so when we start telling stories, then we don't stop, and then it becomes a problem. So I think finding that balance is key. And I guess it leads me to kind of the last thing, which is leadership, systems thinking and leadership. um that's a big one, because usually the people with the most power are usually got there because they were very selfish, usually, or very not not there is basically a conflict of values when it comes to how you get to leadership and what is required once you are there. What do I mean is, you get to leadership roles usually because you were seen, right? You were seen. You are the one with initiatives. You were the one who put up your hand and say, "I'll do it." You were the one who said, "Hey, man, I'll solve it." But that essentially is a selfish, right? I mean, you're selfish in a sense that sometimes selfish not so much regarding you, but regarding the issue itself, right? Sometimes, selfish is not
Or
so much
ego
just you.
driven.
Exactly. So you want to kind of showcase, and that showcase is what gets you there. But then you get to leadership, and showcase is no longer something that's needed. It's more like a collaborative effort of you looking at others, but now you don't even have the character for that, because that's not how you got there. So I guess the question for me is, how do you reconcile all this, Anele, in terms of
Mm.
leadership, and how does one kind of make use of system thinking to help?
I think you've mentioned something that I was asking myself earlier, that why is it that systems thinking is a concept that we're talking about a lot more now and we're thinking about it, but it's exactly that, right? With the leadership that you described, that you come up, it's ego driven. The world was working in silos for the longest time, and I think that's the approach, that complex problems need as much collaboration, as much input as possible so that we can solve for them. And we
Mm-hmm.
cannot work in silos. So I cannot work to be visible on my own anymore. I need to work to be visible with the cause and with the organization so that we can make the impact we want to make. So systems thinking is very crucial in leadership because it encourages collaboration, because
Mm-hmm.
then you don't have to work in silos. It also ensures that leadership can see all the different dots where they connect and anticipate some of the issues that might come along in the way. And I think it also strengthens strategic thinking, because you're able to piece together the different, pieces to solve the problem. So I think ultimately we have complex problems. We can't solve them alone. We need more players. And I think it's very important to consider that even in leadership, so that we don't have departments working in silos, but we've got everybody working together, good internal stakeholder managements, and strategic thinking so that we can solve one big problem. And I guess that's what you were saying as well, that maybe organizations don't solve problems because there's one person trying to solve it on their own, or one department or three departments coming together to solve it on their own and leaving out the others.
Hmm. 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 You know what, Anele? This was such an amazing chat. I have nothing to add. Wow, systems thinking. Um, wow, guys, really, this was such an amazing discussion. Anele, how are we feeling?
I feel good. I feel like I could talk about this the whole day.
All right, guys, this was another episode of MoloMolo Tech Talk. I'm Dr. PK. This was Anele. Until next time, ciao.
Bye.